The soft hum of the Centauri diplomatic frigate echoed through the long, polished corridors. Deep in orbit over the gas giant Scifi, the ship hosted delegates from over 12 star systems. The air was clean and sterile, every surface glowing. Gently with blue light, in the observation chamber, a dozen alien officers studied a rotating hologram of a missile warhead. Each one wore a different uniform, shaped by their culture. Some had scales, others fur, few even shimmered like jellyfish in glass suits. And then there was the human. Lieutenant Jace Marin stood near the back, arms folded, leaning against a control console. He looked casual to casual, perhaps. Short, brown hair, sharp green eyes, and the kind of relaxed grin that didn't seem to belong on a military officer. He chewed a piece of gum slowly, watching the others with quiet amusement. The speaker at the center was Commander Kalanara, a tall Centauri woman. Her silver armor fit perfectly to her graceful form, her skin a pale violet that shimmered faintly under the chamber lights. Her voice carried authority, and her tone carried something colder judgment. Once again, Kalanara said, pointing at the simulation, the missile moves at Mach 22 within 3 seconds of launch. No organic species has ever managed. To intercept it mid-flight, her sharp gaze moved across the room, finally resting on Jace, especially not humans. Some chuckles rose from the room. The Trillari ambassador coughed politely, but his tendrils twitched in amusement. Even the silent Sarakai envoy blinked slowly in what passed for laughter. Jace smiled and took the gum from his mouth, folding it. Into a napkin? He didn't reply. Kalanara crossed her arms, walking slowly toward him. Earth's defense records show more friendly fire incidents than confirmed long-range hits. You train with bullet-propelling chemical sticks, and yet your representative here signed up for a sniper demonstration against a moving missile. She paused in front of him, eyes narrowing. Why? Jace pushed off the console and stood straight. For the first time, he spoke. Because you asked for volunteers, he said, voice calm. And because I've hit moving targets smaller than that ... with a bad scope and wind in my face. Kalena raised an eyebrow. Do you even understand what kind of speed we're talking about? Sure, he said, nodding. I just don't care. More chuckles. One of the Galaxy Sentinels muttered something in their clicking language. Jace didn't need a translator to know it wasn't a compliment, but still, he smiled. Later that evening, Jace sat in the crew lounge watching a screen showing a live feed of the missile simulation. Holly, his portable AI assistant, hovered beside him in a small floating orb. They don't like you, Holly said, in her soft voice. Nah, Jace said, sipping coffee. They just don't know me yet. Your shot probability against the missile is calculated at less than 1%, Holly added. Cool. That means when I hit it, they'll write stories about it. Holly made a soft digital sigh. Back in the command room, Kalanara stood with her second-in-command, Lieutenant Vortek. I don't understand humans, Vortek said, his voice low and rough. They are unpredictable, Kalanara replied. Loud, messy, and yet every time we underestimate them, they surprise us. She tapped on the glass table, staring at the readout of Jace Marin's file. Earth developed faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They are barely out of the cradle. And yet, they want a seat at the table with the Vicari, the Centauri, the Sura. Kai ... Vortek looked at her. Do you think he actually believes he can shoot that missile? Lips curled slightly, not quite a smile, but close. He does believe it. That's what makes them dangerous. The next day, preparations for the demonstration began. A modified railgun platform was mounted on the ship's outer deck, and a mock missile would be fired through a controlled flight path in orbit. Most officers thought the event would be a brief failure, perhaps even a humorous one. But Jace took it seriously. He inspected the platform, adjusted the scope himself, and even calibrated it without any assistance. Holly floated beside him, offering numbers he ignored. You're not using the targeting AI? Kalanara asked, watching from behind. Nope, Jace replied. I want to see it, not let a computer guess for me. Kalanara narrowed her eyes. Primitive. Jace shrugged. Sometimes simple is best. She shook her head and turned to leave. You'll miss. Jace didn't answer. He was already adjusting for imaginary wind that didn't exist in space. His fingers moved with care, the way a painter might prepare. A brushstroke. That night, as the crew slept or reviewed data, Kalanara stood by the viewing window alone. She watched Earth in the distance, tiny, fragile, and full of life. Barely out of the cradle, she whispered. And yet, for some reason, she couldn't stop thinking about that grin, that human grin. Inside the high command room of the Zentari diplomatic frigate, tension hung in the air like thick smoke. A red warning glow pulsed from the center console. Dozens of holographic displays showed the same thing. A large, fast-moving object was entering the outer edge of Coalition space. Commander Kalanara stood at the front of the room. Jaw tight. It's Devourer, she said. All the officers froze. Devourer was a rogue AI warship. Once built by a failed machine empire, it had gone silent for years, drifting in the dark sectors of space. But now, it was backhand, moving fast. It had already destroyed 2 scouting ships near the Karthus belt. It's heading toward Delphus Ikes, said a technician. A populated colony world. They have no planetary shields. Kalanara turned toward the display. The warship's path was direct. It was not chasing anything. It had a target. How much time until launch? She asked. 17 hours, the technician replied. They'll fire one of their hypersonic missiles as they pass Delphus orbit. Kalanara stepped back from the console. She knew the planet could not be evacuated in time. The missile, once launched, would be impossible to stop. It traveled at speeds faster than most weapons could track. She turned to the room. We need a plan. Fighters will take too long. Our intercept systems are too far out. Suggestions? There was silence. One voice finally spoke. I'll take the shot. Everyone turned. Jace Marin stood near the back of the room, calm as ever. His hands were in his jacket pockets. You can't be serious, said a Sarakai captain. That missile travels at Mach 22. You'd be dead before the trigger clicked, muttered someone else. Jace ignored the comments. He looked directly at Kalanara. I'll take the shot, he repeated. From orbit, just give me the railgun. In a clean angle. Kalanara stared at him. That's not possible. The shot would require inhuman precision. You'd be aiming from a platform hundreds of kilometers away, against a target moving faster than sound, in vacuum. Good thing I brought my lucky. Socks, Jace said with a smirk. No one laughed. Are you mocking this situation? Kalanara said sharply. Jace shook his head. No, ma'am. I'm just not afraid of it. Kalanara studied him carefully. His heart rate was steady. No fear in his eyes, not arrogance, just calm confidence. Do you understand what failure means? She asked. Yes, he said. It means a planet dies. Kalanara turned to her command officers. I'll prepare. The orbital deck. Install the long barrel railgun. Give him the targeting systems, Commander, Vortek asked, surprised. Are we really letting a human try this? Kalanara nodded slowly. No one else is even trying. Hours later, the railgun platform was secured on the edge of the orbital ring. It looked like a giant cannon fixed to a long, narrow platform floating just beyond the frigate's main structure. From there, Earth's moon was barely a speck. Delphus Ix hung in the far distance, glowing like a blue marble. Jace stood on the platform, wearing a sealed pressure suit. His helmet was open for now, and Holly hovered beside him, projecting data across the visor glass. Range, 421 kilometers, Holly said. Target velocity, increasing. Wind, none. Atmosphere, none. Luck required. Maximum, thanks, Jace replied, locking the railgun's magnetic coils in place. Helpful as always. He moved slowly, carefully adjusting every dial, every setting. The railgun was powerful, but not designed for shots like this. It was made for close orbital combat, not long-range precision. But he didn't care. He trusted his hands. He trusted his aim. And most of all, he trusted his instinct. Behind the glass of the control room, Kalanera watched. "He's actually doing it," Vortex said. "What do humans eat that makes them this insane?" Kalanera didn't answer. She watched Jace's posture. He was focused. Still, not even shaking. Maybe he was insane. Or maybe humans just had something the others didn't. Inside his helmet, Jace's breathing slowed. I tapped the trigger gently, testing the resistance. The scope displayed thousands of numbers, flight paths, error margins. Holly offered several firing solutions. He ignored them all. "Manual aim," he said. "Are you sure?" Holly asked. "Yes. Lock me out." Holly blinked once, then went silent. Jace narrowed his eyes. The missile hadn't launched yet. But he knew the second it did, he'd have only one chance. The moment arrived faster than expected. A small flash appeared from the far side of the Devourer. A sleek black missile launched from its underbelly, streaking toward Delphus Ix like a dart of death. "Missile away," Holly said. "Speed. Mach 22. Time to impact. 37 seconds. Jace leaned into the scope. He didn't blink. He breathed once, then held it. 35 seconds, Holly said. JACE followed the blur. His fingers moved just slightly, adjusting the angle by less than a millimeter. 32. He could feel it. His body wasn't guessing. It was remembering. Every shot he had ever taken, every time he pulled the trigger with wind screaming in his ears or fire around him, this was no different. 30. He pulled the trigger. The railgun fired with a flash of white-blue energy, hurling the dense tungsten slug across the vacuum of space at impossible speed. Jace didn't look away. He didn't cheer, just watched, quiet, calm. The slug from the railgun tore across the black void of space. No sound followed it. No fire, no trail of smoke. Just silence and speed. From the observation deck inside the Zentari frigate, every alien officer stared at the giant screen in silence. The missile streaked through the stars like a black arrow, moving faster than anything built by organic hands. And behind it, tiny on the screen, came the human's bullet. No guidance, no tracking, just raw calculation and belief, Commander. Kalanara stood frozen. Her heart beat faster than she expected. Not from fear, but anticipation. She didn't want to believe the human could do it, and yet part of her hoped he would. Jace Marin, floating alone on the orbital platform, watched the screen inside his helmet. He still hadn't moved. His finger stayed on the trigger even after the shot had fired, as if time itself was holding its breath. Impact window in 3 seconds. Allah, E's voice said in his ear. Jace exhaled slowly. Inside the command chamber, someone whispered, "It's too far behind. The slug won't catch it." Another answered, "It's not behind. It's on the missile's path." Kalanara didn't speak. Her eyes stayed fixed on the red tracking dots, one representing the missile, the other the slug. They were closing in. Space, the missile flew, undisturbed, cutting through the void toward Delphus Ix. It had no mind, no emotion. Just orders. Delivered destruction. Then, without warning, the slug caught up. A flash sharp, silent, perfect. The slug slammed into the missile's warhead at a diagonal angle, right above its guidance fin. For 1 second, the warhead cracked, and the entire missile broke apart in a silent explosion. Shards of metal, propellant fire, and torn circuits spun into space. Inside the frigate, the screen flashed. Target DSTRO. If the room went completely still. Not even a breath. Kalanara stepped forward. Slowly. She replayed the final frame, the missile hole, then shattered like glass under a hammer. The human had done it. He had hit a speeding, missile fired from a ship hundreds of kilometers away with a single, unguided shot. From orbit, outside, Jace finally blinked. "Target down," Holly said calmly. Missile destroyed. 0 fragments reached Delpha's atmosphere. Jace smiled behind his visor. Nice. His voice was quiet. He didn't cheer. He didn't pump his fists. God. He slowly stood up from the railgun, floating gently in the low-gravity field of the platform. He turned his head toward the control deck camera. Kalanara was watching through the feed. Jack raised one hand and winked. Then he said simply, "Told you I don't miss." Back in the command chamber, a few officers started clapping. Slowly. At first, then louder. Some still looked stunned. The Sarakai delegate, usually cold and unreadable, gave a slow nod. Kalanara didn't clap. She stood with her arms crossed, looking at the screen where Jace was being pulled back in through the airlock. Her face was unreadable, but her thoughts raced. Why did this human, this calm, joking, rule-breaking human do what entire fleets had failed to do? Was it skill, luck, madness, or something else? Later in the debriefing room, Jace sat in his pressure suit, sipping a hot drink. His hair was messy from the helmet, and his eyes were a little tired. But he smiled like someone who just finished a morning jog. Kalanara entered. Walking silently to the table across from him, she didn't sit. She just looked at him for a long moment. "I reviewed the footage," she said. "Good angle." Jace asked with a smirk. "You didn't use our firing solution?" she continued. "Nope. You ignored the AI's recommended shot path." "Yep." "You aimed manually?" "I did." She stepped closer. "There was less than a 1% chance that would work. You knew that." "I did." "Why did you trust yourself over?" The AI Jace leaned back in his chair. "Because sometimes numbers don't matter. I know my shot. I've done worse shots. It's not in space. Sure, but my eyes don't care about the setting." Kalanara tilted her head slightly. "You risked everything on instinct." "No," he replied. "I risked everything on training, memory, and the fact that sometimes you just have to try, even if no one thinks you can." She stared at him. Again, there was no boast in his voice, no pride, just honesty. "You were lucky," she finally said. Maybe Jace agreed. "That. But you noticed something." She exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. "I don't know whether your species is brave or completely unhinged." Jace grinned. "Maybe both." That evening, across the Coalition network, the footage of the shot spread like wildfire. The hologram replayed again and again, the slug leaving the railgun, the missile exploding, and the moment when the human winked at the camera. Social media from over 12 species reacted. Some called it fake, some called it impossible, and others began to look at humanity with new eyes. They weren't just reckless newcomers anymore. They were something else, something to watch closely. The story of the orbital shot spread faster than any missile ever could. By the end of the day, hundreds of space stations had already played the footage. Within a week, it was being shown in military academies, civilian channels, and even alien news networks across the galactic core. Some called it luck, others called it a miracle, but most just called it what it was: impossible. And yet, it had happened. One shot. One bullet. One human, Lieutenant Jace Marin, didn't enjoy the attention. Spent the next few days avoiding reporters, diplomats, and curious officers who suddenly wanted to know his training background. Holly floated beside him constantly. "Giving updates? You have 173 new message requests," she said as they walked through the lower deck hallway, including invitations from Zentari combat schools, 3 alien news stations, and a cooking show called Flavors of War. "A cooking show?" Jace asked, raising an eyebrow. "They said you'd be a fun guest. Something about adding spice to space combat." Jace shook his head with a smile. "I just took a shot. That's all I did." Holly spun slowly. "That's not all you did, Jace. You gave the galaxy something they didn't expect. Hope that humans are more than noise." In chaos, in the upper command tower, Commander Kalanara reviewed her report. She had written dozens of battlefield summaries in her life, but this one was different. Not just because of the shot, but because of what came after. Diplomatic messages from other empires started arriving. One from the Vekari Council read, "Please extend our congratulations to the human marksman. We are reviewing Earth's admission request with new interest." Another from the Sarakai Dominion said, "Perhaps humanity's instincts should not be ignored. recommend cultural exchange. Kalanara placed the reports on her desk and stared out the large viewing window. Stars blinked in the distance, cold and silent. Barely out of the cradle, she whispered, remembering her own words. She had doubted them, laughed at them. But now, she wasn't so sure. Jace was called to the Coalition briefing hall 2 days. Later, it was an enormous, curved room filled with delegates and officers from all over the galaxy. He stood on the central platform looking out at rows of eyes, some human, some not. Many blinking in ways he didn't understand. Kalanara stepped onto the stage beside him. This human, she began, her voice clear and steady, took a shot no one believed possible. He did not rely on targeting systems. He did not follow standard procedure. He followed instinct, training, and something else. She looked at Jace for a second, then turned back to the crowd. He reminded us that sometimes skill comes not from advanced tools, but from heart, focus, and courage. There was a pause. Then, slowly, the audience began to clap, some clapping with hands, others with claws, fins, or even wings. Jace smiled awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. I really just didn't want the planet to blow up, he said. Into the mic. Few officers chuckled. After the ceremony, Kalanara walked beside Jace in the corridor. I have something for you, she said, handing him a slim silver medal. What's this? Zentari commendation for precision. 3 have ever been given. He looked at it, turning it over in his hand. I didn't think you liked me, he said. I didn't, she replied. No, I respect you. That's harder to earn. Jace raised an eyebrow. So I'm officially part of the club now, Kalanara smirked. No, but the door's open. Over the following weeks, Jace's shot inspired more than just praise. Human applications to the Coalition doubled. Other races began requesting joint training with Earth's forces. Some even asked for human instructors. The phrase, shoot like a human, became a compliment among young officers. In many war academies, the moment of Jace's shot became required viewing, but not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the Coalition network, certain powers began watching Earth more closely. Some feared this new attention. Others wanted to challenge it. A file marked priority, human, opened on a distant moonbase. But Jace didn't know that yet. He was too busy eating a warm sandwich. In the break room, and pretending not to see the camera drone floating nearby, Kalanara visited Earth a month later for a diplomatic summit. The planet surprised her. Loud, yes. Crowded, yes. But full of color, life, and creativity. Everything moved fast. Music, people, cars, languages. And yet somehow, it all worked. She met Jace again at the edge of a training field in New Colorado. He handed her a pair of shooting glasses and pointed at a nearby range. Let's see if you can hit a target without a guidance system, he said. She narrowed her eyes. Are you challenging me? He grinned. No, I'm teaching you the human way. She rolled her eyes, but accepted the glasses. Later that day, Kalanara missed the target 6 times. The 7th bullet finally hit a corner of the practice drone. JCE clapped slowly. Not bad. She handed him the gun back. Next time, she said, I'll aim for your ego. Jace laughed. That's a small target. When the first time Kalanara smiled, the peace between the galactic species was always fragile. Jace. Marin sat in his quarters aboard the Zentari diplomatic frigate, looking over the stars through a wide viewing window. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before him, filled with swirling dust clouds, distant stars, and the occasional flicker of a passing ship. But peace wasn't the only thing in the air. Something else was coming. Humanity's rise wasn't unnoticed anymore, after his historic shot. Jace had found himself in high demand. Zentari were still respectful, even friendly, but their behavior had shifted. It wasn't admiration alone. That fueled their new interest in Earth. It was something else. Respect, yes, but fear too. Jace couldn't blame them. There was something about humanity's unpredictability, something raw in their nature that made the galaxy sit up. And it wasn't just about sniping missiles anymore. Humanity wasn't just an unknown factor anymore. They were an ally, and possibly a new threat to be reckoned with. The door chimed, pulling Jace from his thoughts. "Come in," he called. The door slid open, revealing Commander Kalanara. She stepped inside, her purple armor glinting in the dim light. She had a look of deep concern on her face, something Jace hadn't seen before. "I need you for a mission," she said, her voice low. Jace frowned. "What's going on?" "There's been an incident. We've received a distress signal from Solaris 9, a neutral world on the edge of Coalition space." She paused, her tone turning serious. "The Vicari have attacked. It's a surprise assault." "The Vicari," Jace echoed, his brow furrowing. "Why would they attack a neutral planet? That's not like them." Kalanara nodded grimly. "Exactly. That's what's troubling. Their forces are too well coordinated, too sudden. They've overrun the planet's defense grid with little resistance." Jace leaned forward. "What does this have to do with me?" "We need someone who can strike fast and precise," Kalanara said. "And we need it done quietly. No major fleet movements. Small team, under the radar. It's your kind of mission." Jace stood, his eyes narrowing. "So you're asking me to take down an entire Vicari force with a few men? Is that what you're suggesting?" "Not an entire force," Kalanara said. "But we believe there's a weakness. They have a new type of weapon. A pulse generator. It's disrupting all communication and targeting systems on Solaris 9. If we destroy it, the Vicari will lose their advantage." Jace nodded. "All right. I'm in." The team was small, just Jace, Kalanara, and a few of her Zantari elite soldiers. They boarded a stealth shuttle, which would take them to Solaris 9, a world covered in deep forests and high mountains. The Vicari forces had already set up a base in the capital city, which was now in ruins. Jace sat in the shuttle, watching the planet below. He'd been in combat before, but this was different. The stakes were higher. This wasn't a standard battle. This was a chance to stop something much worse before it spread. "This pulse generator," Jace asked, turning to Kalanara. "How do we find it?" "We've got a rough location. It's inside the Vicari command tower. Getting there will be the hard part. We can handle that," Jace said confidently. The shuttle landed a few miles from the capital. The Zantari, soldiers trained for silent infiltration, moved swiftly, blending into the dense jungle. Jace led the way, his rifle slung across his back. The team was silent, except for the occasional whisper of movement in the trees. The city was eerily quiet. Buildings that once stood proud and tall were now just shells. Craters from Vicari weapons dotted the ground like scars on the planet's surface. Jace's eyes scanned the area, alert for anything that didn't belong. As they approached the Vicari command tower, the pulse generator's signal began to grow stronger. "There it is," Kalanara murmured. The generator was housed in the heart of the command tower. They had to get in, disable it, and get out. Without alerting the entire Vicari army, Jace's mind raced through the plan, checking for holes, weaknesses. "Stealth is the key," Kalanara said as if reading his mind. "One mistake, and this whole place will know we're here." Jace gave her a wry grin. "You just worry about shooting things. I'll handle the rest." The tower was guarded by a handful of Vicari soldiers, but they were no match for the quiet precision of the Zantari team. In mere minutes, the guards were neutralized without a sound. Jace and Kalanara slipped inside, making their way through the corridors toward the pulse generator. The pulse was getting stronger, more constant. They were close. "Once we hit this thing, we'll be on a timer," Jace whispered. "Let's make it count." Kalanara gave a quick nod. "Get ready." They reached the control room. Jace could feel the hum of the pulse generator in his bones. His mind calculated the next steps. He knew they had one shot at this. He glanced at Kalanara. "On my mark." Jace took a deep breath. His hand moved to his rifle, ready for the moment when they would disable the generator. It wasn't about brute force. It was about precision. A shot just like the one he took back on the Zantari frigate. The seconds stretched. The countdown had begun. Outside the tower, a distant rumble signaled the first sign of a Vicari counteroffensive. The clock was ticking. Jace's finger tightened on the trigger. His eyes locked on the pulse generator, his mind calm, clear. The mission would either end in success or in an explosion. The tower shook as the ground beneath them rumbled. The Vekari forces were closing in, and time was running out. Jace Marin crouched behind a steel pillar, his fingers lightly resting on the trigger of his rifle. The pulse generator was a few meters away, humming with an eerie energy. Its whirry sound filled the room like the prelude to an explosion. They had seconds, maybe minutes, before the Vekari reinforcements reached them. "This is it," Kalanara whispered, her voice calm but with a slight edge of urgency. She had already positioned her team in the hall, ready to cover their escape. Jace nodded without looking at her. His eyes were locked on the generator. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to spring into action. "On my mark," he said, his voice steady. Kalanara moved into position, her rifle ready. She was silent, as always, moving like a shadow. Jace trusted her, but this wasn't just about trust. This was about precision, skill, and focus. He knew this shot would need everything he had. "Ready?" Kalanara said quietly, her eyes scanning the hallway for any movement. Jace took a deep breath. The seconds ticked by like hours. His pulse was steady, calm. He'd done this 1,000 times before in training. Now it was real. His mind ran through the calculations again. The distance, the angle, the trajectory of the pulse generator. He had to be perfect. He moved silently, taking his first step toward the generator. Every step felt deliberate, each one inching him closer to their goal. He glanced over at Kalanara. Once more. She was keeping a watchful eye on the hallway, alert for any sign of danger. 3 seconds, Jace murmured, his focus never wavering. Outside the tower, the rumble of approaching Vekari reinforcements was growing louder. The battle for Solarius 9 was intensifying, but they couldn't afford to wait for the larger forces to arrive. The pulse generator was their only hope of turning the tide. If they didn't destroy it, the Vekari would control the planet, and if the Vekari controlled Solarius 9, they would hold an unprecedented advantage in the galaxy. Jace's fingers tightened on the rifle, his scope locked on the generator. It was glowing faintly now, the energy emanating from its core as it pulsed with unnatural power. He had one shot. "Now," Jace whispered. Kalanara and the Zentari soldiers began moving, covering him as he took the final few steps. He raised the rifle, adjusting his stance, lining up the crosshairs on the pulse generator focus, he thought. Just like last time, his breath slowed, his mind quieted. He didn't need the targeting system this time. He didn't need any help. This was just him, his hands, his instincts, his training. The pulse generator glowed brighter as it prepared to discharge. Jace's heart rate picked up, but his hands remained steady. He adjusted his angle just slightly, correcting for the pulse's energy disturbance. "Ready," he whispered to himself. His finger pressed gently against the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and clean. The pulse generator cracked. A bright flash of light erupted from the impact point, followed by a series of violent sparks. The tower shook, and the room filled with the sound of electric humming and the smell of burnt circuits. The generator sputtered, struggling to remain operational, but it was too late. The pulse generator exploded with a sudden, violent force, sending a shockwave through the tower. The walls trembled. Debris flew in every direction, some of it ricocheting off the walls. But the generator was gone. Jace didn't move. He stayed where he was, watching the smoke and sparks rise from the broken device. His heart was still steady, his breath controlled. The room was silent for a moment, save for the distant sounds of the Vekari forces gathering outside. "We've done it," Kalanara said, her voice firm and relieved. "The pulse generator's gone. They'll lose their advantage." Jace didn't say anything. He just looked at the shattered remains of the generator. They had done it. They had struck the heart of the Vekari assault with precision, just like he'd done with that missile. But there was no time to relax. "We need to move," Kalanara added, her voice urgent. Now, the team moved quickly, retracing their steps through the tower's corridors. The Vekari forces were already advancing, and they could hear the sounds of soldiers approaching from both ends of the hall. Jace and Kalanara led the group through the wreckage, avoiding open areas and sticking to the shadows. Every step felt like an eternity, but Jace knew that the only way to survive now was to stay focused. He couldn't afford any distractions. The mission had been a success, but they still had to get out. "We're almost there," Jace said, his voice steady despite the urgency in the air. The shuttle was waiting for them, just as planned. The small craft was tucked away behind a row of tall trees, camouflaged against the surrounding jungle. The team quickly boarded, and Jace secured his gear as the shuttle's engines hummed to life. The doors closed, sealing them in. Mission accomplished, Kalanara said, her voice calm now that they were in motion. "You've done it again, Jace. You've saved this planet." Jace looked out the window, watching as the shuttle lifted off from the jungle floor and ascended into the sky. The battle below was still raging, but Solaris 9 was no longer under the Valkyrie's control. For now, at least, the galaxy was safer. Jake let out a slow breath, his eyes focused on the stars ahead. The shot had been a risk. Sometimes, he thought, the best way to win was to trust your instincts, and humanity had plenty of those.